It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. President Zelenskyy admits his troops are not able to push Russia out of the occupied areas of Ukraine as he meets world leaders to discuss further support for the war.
What further military support, what further finances are necessary to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position?
Also tonight, Keir Starmer defends the decision not to pay compensation to Waspi women after pressure ramps up from his own party. The husband who pleaded guilty to drugging his wife and allowing strangers to rape her to be sentenced as France awaits the verdicts on 51 defendants. A teenage driver who took laughing gas behind the wheel is jailed for 9 years after killing 3 of his friends in a high-speed crash.
So hard. Feels like I lost my brother and my parents.
Going up again, clothing and fuel drive a rise in inflation for the second month running. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello, good evening. It is approaching 3 years since Russia began the war in Ukraine, their troops taking territory in the east of the country. Tonight, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has admitted it may not be possible to continue fighting in the areas already occupied by Russian forces. It's not the first time we've heard him comment like that. Last month, he suggested to Sky News that he may agree to a ceasefire deal, which includes loss of territory. He's currently meeting world leaders at a summit in Brussels, where David Lammy, the British Foreign Secretary, said the UK is prepared to discuss what further military support is necessary to help Ukraine. Sky's Europe correspondent Adam Parsons reports now from Brussels.
Are we seeing the start of a path towards the end of war? After nearly 3 years of fighting, death and destruction, Ukraine's president has admitted reluctantly that his country may have to relinquish territory to Russia. In an interview with a French newspaper, he struck a thoughtful tone.
We cannot give up our territories. The Ukrainian constitution forbids us to do so, but we do not have the strength to recover them. We can only count on diplomatic pressure from the international community to force Putin to sit down at the negotiating table.
He's come to Brussels, the heart of European diplomacy, to meet NATO and EU leaders.
I think it's a very good opportunity to speak about security guarantees for Ukraine for today and for tomorrow, as you said. Well, almost everything said. But it's really very important that to use these 2 days in Brussels to meet with all our partners.
Alongside him, the head of NATO, talking about a peace deal, but clear that Ukraine must be able to negotiate from a position of strength.
Very much high on the agenda is to make sure that the president, his team, Ukraine are in the best possible position one day, when they decide so, to start the peace talks.
Crimea and the Donbass are the areas Zelenskyy would surely have to give up. It might sound a simple solution, but to many Ukrainians, the idea of ceding territory is now unpalatable. The Foreign Secretary is here for this vital meeting. He told me the Ukraine would continue supplying weapons to bolster Ukraine's defences.
I do not see Putin at this stage ready to negotiate. What I see is him firing more missiles, is him sending more young men to their slaughter, is him wanting to divide European allies at this time.
It is only a few weeks since President Zelenskyy raised the spectre of a resolution when he told Sky News that NATO membership would end the war.
If we want to stop the hot stage of the war, we should take under NATO umbrella the territory of Ukraine that we have under our control. That's what we need to do fast. And then Ukraine can get back the other part of its territory diplomatically.
He won't get that, not immediately anyway, but he is getting diplomatic heft. Today, Keir Starmer and Donald Trump spoke on the phone, Ukraine high on their agenda. The fighting does go on. It is gruelling, vicious warfare. A ceasefire is a tempting prospect, but it's only that at the moment, a prospect. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Brussels.
Well, Adam joins me now from Brussels, and our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is in Westminster. So, Adam, a change again in tone from the Ukrainian president, but more talks tomorrow. What can we expect?
And in fact, talks going on tonight. In that building behind me, you can see beyond those police motorcycles, that is Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, his private residence over there, and a very, very high-powered meeting that has been going on tonight involving him on behalf of NATO, Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, but also President Zelenskyy is in there, Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor is in there, David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary in there, and various other European leaders. And all of them only allowed to bring in one person with them. It is an intense meeting about the state of play. And certainly, at the heart of that will be a stock take of what it would take to now push Ukraine towards some kind of ceasefire. We are, of course, wary about ever conflating ceasefire and peace deal. But I think that step that Zelenskyy has taken towards talking about Ukraine's inability to take back that land means that we have just incrementally moved towards this discussion. Rutte was talking about negotiations, and this is a change of tone. NATO has a new Secretary General. Zelenskyy is being pushed into thinking how he can sell this. Donald Trump is coming in. And of course, all of these leaders will want to call the bluff of Vladimir Putin. If they say, we will be open to doing a deal, then it will be up to Putin to say what terms he would want. And of course, everyone knows that when Trump comes along, there's that spectre of him cutting aid to Ukraine. And at the moment, Europe's message is, whatever happens, Ukraine, we are still on your side. We'll still keep writing checks.
Well, talking of Donald Trump, let's head to John. And we heard there that the Prime Minister has spoken tonight to the President-elect. What came out of that, John?
The Prime Minister's message to the President-elect was that the Allies need to stand together with Ukraine. Now, he says they must stand together in the face of Russian aggression and ensure Ukraine is in the strongest possible position. These are words similar to things he said when he is in Europe earlier this week, Norway and Estonia, where he's meeting other European leaders. And Sir Keir talked about where if there's going to be negotiations, it's important for Ukraine to be in the strongest possible position. They also obviously talked about the Middle East as well. On that, the Prime Minister talked about the need to work together. Now, the prospect of a big change in US policy, of course, looms large. On Ukraine, of course, the President-elect has said he's against firing missiles into Russia. On the Middle East, he said there'll be hell to pay if the hostages aren't released by the time he is inaugurated on the 20th of January. The President also was very cordial about meeting the Prince of Wales when he went to the opening of Notre Dame a few weeks ago. And finally, the two leaders agreed to keep in touch, according to Number 10, and look forward to seeing one another at the earliest opportunity. Now, there is talk that the PM may go to Washington in February. They're playing that down here, no dates yet, they say, but clearly the Prime Minister is very keen to get on the front foot with the President-elect at a time when Nigel Farage is boasting about his hotline to President Trump.
John, live for us there in Downing Street. Thank you. Well, last night we explained how the Prime Minister was facing backlash for his decision not to compensate the women affected by a change in their pension age. And now, after mounting pressure from his own party, Sir Keir Starmer was forced to defend the move in Parliament, saying that the taxpayers simply can't afford the burden. Now, the row is over trust, given that Labour publicly supported the Waspi women before they won the election. Sky's political correspondent Amanda Akas has more.
Save the winter fuel!
Cutting pensioners' winter fuel allowance. Charging farmers inheritance tax.
What do we want? Justice!
And now denying compensation to the Waspi women. The government say they've been forced into difficult decisions because of the nation's finances, but it's not what many people thought they were voting for.
Have you betrayed the Waspi women, Prime Minister?
The decision not to compensate women hit by increases to the state pension age led to attacks from all sides at PMQs.
The Deputy Prime Minister said Conservatives were stealing their pensions. She promised to compensate them in full. Another broken promise.
I believe these women are owed compensation for the injustice done to them at the hands of the state.
Does the Prime Minister really understand how let down Waspi women feel today?
The PM argued compensation wasn't justified.
The research is clear that 90% of those impacted did know about the change. And in those circumstances, the taxpayer simply can't afford the burden of tens of billions of pounds of compensation. But I do understand the concerns.
A report by the Parliamentary Ombudsman in March found that women born in the 50s may have been adversely impacted by the government's failure to adequately warn them the state pension age was increasing to 65 and recommended compensation of up to £2,950. Christine is one of those women.
Politicians, especially Labour, actively campaigned prior to their election to say they supported the campaign. And as soon as they're in government, they backtracked.
How did it make you feel when you
Very
learned?
angry. Pure and simple, it's a betrayal, 100%.
Finding £10 billion to compensate the Waspi women wasn't in Labour's election manifesto, and the Tories weren't stumping up the cash either. But coming after a whole series of unpopular policies, the public's faith in Sir Keir Starmer was already plummeting. The latest Ipsos poll this week suggests 61% of people are dissatisfied with his performance. This latest decision, after he and so many Cabinet colleagues once publicly backed the Waspi women, will surely only make that worse. Amanda Acas, Sky News, Westminster.
Inflation figures rose again today, meaning the rate at which prices are now rising is now at 2.6%. It's the second month in a row it's increased, moving further away from the 2% target set by the Bank of England. Our business correspondent Gurpreet Narwan explains why inflation keeps rising and what it means for interest rates.
The festive season, it should be boom time for the economy. But there are warning lights flashing. Inflation is on the up. Shoppers in Manchester say it's going to be an expensive Christmas this year.
I'm a PhD student, so I don't exactly get a lot of money, so it's actually really difficult to get people the gifts I want to get them because I can't afford it this year.
I try and sort of make my own things to keep it a little cheaper, which is it's a bit more humbling to gift someone something that you've created yourself.
I've got 7 grandchildren, and if I buy them all, like £20 a present, which might sound loads to some people, but I've reduced that this year because I just think it gets too much. It gets silly.
Inflation has come down considerably since the worst days of the cost of living crisis, but it is rising again. The index hit 2.6% in November, above the Bank of England's 2% target, and it's likely to stay above that target for longer too. The past few years have left everyone poorer. Prices are more than 20% higher than they were in 2021. But the Chancellor says she's not being complacent.
I recognise that the cost of living crisis continues to bite. That's why in the budget we increased the national living wage, a pay rise for 3 million workers, and it's why we froze fuel duty so that motorists are not paying more at the pumps.
But the measures in the Chancellor's budget are also pushing inflation higher. Her budget included a big increase in public spending as well as tax rises that will put upward pressure on prices, keeping inflation above target for longer. The headline rate should eventually fall back. But if the past few years have taught us anything, it's that inflation can be temperamental and stubborn, quickly moving against us. It explains why the Bank of England is taking a cautious approach to cutting interest rates. The Monetary Policy Committee is likely to keep interest rates on hold when it meets tomorrow.
I think there were quite significant expectations for interest rate reductions. They've not happened this year, and they're not going to happen, I think, next year. So interest rates are probably going to hover around 4 to 5%.
Interest rates went up like a rocket, but they are coming down like a snowflake. With inflation on the up again, we have some time to wait before they settle. Gurpreet Narwan, Sky News.
Let's go now to a story that has rocked France. The case of a husband who has admitted drugging and raping his wife, Gisèle Pellico. The trial has gone on for 4 months, during which Dominique Pellico, who is now 72, also explained how he invited strangers to allegedly rape her as well. It is now expected the verdict and the sentencing will be delivered tomorrow morning. Sky's Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins reports now from Avignon.
This is the moment one of France's worst sex offenders is caught. Dominique Pellico's been spotted by a security guard filming up women's skirts. But this upskirting video would lead French police to 20,000 more indecent images. And the discovery that for almost a decade, Dominique had drugged and raped his wife and invited strangers to allegedly rape her as well.
He's extremely dangerous because he's intelligent and he's calculating. Mazan is possibly just a drop in the ocean of what Dominique Pellico has done.
This was Dominique Pellico's victim, the mother of his children, his wife of 50 years, Gisèle. Almost 50 other men are on trial accused of raping or sexually assaulting her. Most of it happened here, in the pretty Provençal village of Mazan, where the Pellicos lived. The man Gisèle called the perfect husband, in fact, a perverted predator, leading scores of strangers to their home to allegedly rape her.
What Dominique Pellico did was beyond betrayal. He planned his crimes meticulously. He asked some of the men to meet him in this car park, and he told them not to wear fragrance, not to smoke, so they didn't leave any scent on Gisèle's body. He'd then walk them down the road to the house where she lay sedated.
The court heard Dominique crushed sleep-inducing drugs into Gisèle's food. He filmed men having sex with his motionless wife. Most of the other defendants deny rape. Around 30 men filmed by Pellico still haven't been identified. This lawyer is defending 30-year-old Charlie A., who's accused of raping Gisèle 6 times.
From the beginning, he was told this was a scenario for swingers, a couple with a fantasy. He was light years away from realizing he was participating in a rape.
Unconscious and powerless when she was attacked, Gisèle consciously waived her right to anonymity. Her bravery's inspired millions. Women across the country and beyond say France is sick.
She speaks for all the women, I think, and she takes her fights for her life, and it became like a story for all the young girls that one day will have to fight for her rights.
Dominique faces the rest of his life in jail. Gisèle says her life has been destroyed, and the horror of what happened to her will haunt France long after the verdicts are delivered.
Siobhan Robbins there. Well, as we've been hearing, the verdicts in the Pellico trial are expected tomorrow morning. We'll have live coverage here on Sky News from 8:30 a.m. The rebel stronghold of Idlib in the northwest of Syria has been governed by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham since 2017. Many people had fled there to escape the regime's brutal repression and look at the HTS leader as their leader. Sky's international correspondent Diana Magnay has been to Idlib to see what life was like under their rule.
We're driving through the countryside south of Idlib, through the ruin of thousands upon thousands of shattered lives. This was a front line in 2019, long before the Islamist fighters of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham swept south from their Idlib stronghold and seized Damascus. Now it is rubble and minefields and abandoned Russian-made tanks. Not a soul in Kafr Nabil, the activist town once known as the heart of the revolution. But up on a hill where Assad's Iranian proxies had set up a base, we meet a couple trying to rebuild their home.
How are we going to be able to rebuild if we don't have enough to eat? What am I supposed to do? Look behind me. It's all ruins. Where do we even start? Look around. Even the trees are gone. What are we supposed to do?
The toll on their family from this war has been horrific. He spent 3 years in jail. They've had 30 relatives killed. Now their sons fight with HTS, and they believe in its leader, Abu Muhammad al-Jalani, or Ahmad al-Shara, as he now wants to be known.
He's such a decent man with great manners, a man of religion, a man with morals. Everything about him is moral. If he takes over, the entire country will be fine.
We came to Idlib to find out what people who've lived under HTS and al-Shara think about his rule. Those who've always called this place their home, and the millions more internally displaced who've sought refuge in the one rebel holdout in Syria's northwest. One of Jalani, or Ahmad al-Shara's, big achievements up here in Idlib has been to stop the various factions from fighting one another and unite them under one authority. Now the question is, can he roll that model out across the country, and will he commit to the more moderate path that he's promising? Some reflexes may be hard to shift. We filmed him a few days ago telling a journalist to cover her head, a clip which had people asking just how secular a one-time Islamist could be. But he has renounced his al-Qaeda roots, and those we speak to up in Idlib say they don't believe he's an extremist.
He seems to be a normal guy. I don't think he's ISIS. None of his actions show that. He's just a guy like me. He's just a normal person like everyone.
But he takes over a broken, traumatized nation. We meet another family leaving the camps, returning home, but without their father. His wife knew he'd been sent to the infamous Sednaya prison, but she found out this week that he was dead.
I went blind from all the crying. They killed him after torturing him and starving him. Do you know those iron presses that they used? My son was only 1 year old when they took him away. He doesn't know anything about his father.
Her son tries to console her. He is the man of the household now. Diana Magnay, Sky News, Idlib.
They were a group of teenagers whose night ended in tragedy when their car crashed at high speed, killing 3 of them. The driver, 19-year-old Thomas Johnson, had inhaled nitrous oxide or laughing gas while at the wheel and ended up speeding at more than 100 miles an hour in a 30 zone. This afternoon, he pleaded guilty to causing the passengers' deaths and was jailed for 9 years and 4 months. The judge said his actions were all for teenage thrills. Sajid Chowdhury reports.
Moments before their deaths, Thomas Johnson's passengers laugh. Tyres screech as he drifts around the corner. The vehicle's electronic stability control has been deliberately switched off. For hours, he and 2 of his passengers had been taking nitrous oxide. It dangerously impaired Johnson's driving. He sped over 100 miles an hour in roads marked 30. Here, he aggressively overtakes another car before crashing into a tree.
He's overtaken at what she describes as extreme excessive speed and he's gone out of view. A matter of seconds later, they've come around the bend to find debris in the road and the same vehicle that's overtaken her in the trees.
Daniel Hancock and Ethan Goddard, both aged 18, and Elliot Pullen, 17, were all killed.
A very, empty feeling. I think it doesn't feel like a family anymore. It's very difficult.
How's it been for your parents?
So hard. It feels like I lost my brother and my parents.
Can't understand why he made the decision he made.
Yeah.
That's the main thing I can't come to terms with.
It's not an accident. Now that we've seen the footage, seen the videos, seen the evidence, it was an accident waiting to happen. You know, it was just completely reckless, dangerous behaviour. There's no way that anybody can, in their right mind, can think that they can drive around at the speeds they were driving while inhaling nitrous oxide balloons and consider that to be safe.
Thomas Johnson says he doesn't remember what happened, but a police interview reveals he was aware of the risks.
Do you remember ever having done that before?
No, not this year, no. I remember doing it once last year with a group of friends, like before I could even drive. And no, I don't have any recollection after that.
Do you remember what the effect of it was?
No, it made me just my head feel dizzy.
Johnson arrived for sentencing with a weekend bag, no doubt aware he'd go away for much, much longer. In court, the judge remarked about his excessive speed, his driving impaired, having ingested nitrous oxide for hours leading up to the crash, and his decision to turn off the vehicle's safety controls. But she said she accepted his remorse.
Johnson alone was responsible for these deaths. He did not set out that night to harm anyone, but his decisions did directly and tragically result in the deaths of Ethan, Elliot and Daniel.
No sentence can bring home the boys lost by these families, but they hope tonight all drivers will feel warned. Sadia Chowdhury, Sky News.
Not guilty pleas have been entered on behalf of the Southport stabbing suspect after he failed to speak in court. Axel Ridicubano, who was 17 at the time, is charged with murdering 3 girls at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class in July. He also faces 10 counts of attempted murder. A criminology student has been found guilty of the murder and attempted murder of 2 women on a beach in Bournemouth. 20-year-old Nassan Sardif fatally stabbed personal trainer Amy Gray 10 times as she sat beside a fire on the beach in May the 24th this year. He was also found guilty of the attempted murder of Ms Gray's friend. A Sky News investigation has found that some children are spending more than 5.5 years of their lives living in temporary accommodation. Data from Freedom of Information requests shows the problem is worsening, with the average length of stay up by nearly a fifth since 2020. Well, it comes as new ONS data revealed a record rise in England. Average rent was £1,362 in November of this year. That is £116 higher than last year and nearly £400 higher than in 2015. Sky's Ida Robinson has the story of one family who have spent 3 years sharing a single room, knowing they could be stuck there for at least another 3 more.
A child of the housing crisis. This is Logan, aged 1, 2 years old, and 3. For most of his life, temporary accommodation's all he's known with his mum, Nicole.
Do you like your home?
Yeah.
Do you like being at home?
It's Mummy's home.
But they're just one of thousands of families spending longer and longer in places like this. A Sky News investigations found some children are spending up to 5.5 years in temporary accommodation.
They told me I could be here for another 3 years. So he'll be nearly 6 before I leave.
We first met Logan and Nicole in emergency accommodation in 2022. She works full-time, but couldn't afford rent.
I've worked since I was 17. I've dedicated my life to working, so why am I finding it so difficult?
A year later, October 2023, and they've been moved.
He's nearly a toddler, or is a toddler.
Another temporary room in a hostel.
Do you feel safe here? No, temporary accommodation isn't safe for a child. It isn't safe for anyone under the age of 7.
Nicole's juggling a full-time job as project manager for an IT company, as a single mother and living like this.
So I would walk a different route.
But as the housing crisis deepens, making ends meet is still a struggle for many like her.
I feel unjustifiable to go to the food bank because I work and I earn money, but I had no money in my pocket. I had no food in my cupboards. I had no food to put in my son's mouth. I had no food to put in my own mouth.
Sky News data also shows families with children are spending longer in temporary accommodation than anyone else. Claire's a lawyer at Southwark Law Centre and she's dealing with a rise in cases.
My fear is that it leads to a two-tier society. We're talking a significant number who will grow up with completely different life chances.
Part of the answer is to build more. The Shadow Housing Minister describes Labour's plan for 1.5 million new homes in 5 years as confused.
Many of the boroughs of London have seen a decrease in their targets for housing delivery. A decrease. Yet we know the demand in London for rough sleeping, for temporary accommodation is at the highest. So that makes no sense.
The government say they've inherited the consequences of years of failure to grip the housing crisis and are working at pace to end homelessness.
Ready?
But almost another year on, in 2024, Logan and Nicole are still in the hostel.
So he's turned 2 and 3 in temporary accommodation?
Yeah, and probably 4.
Oh, wow.
So,
most of his life?
Pretty much, yeah. Most of his childhood, anyway. He always says, oh, why do we only have one room? Which is sad, 'cause I don't know what to say. Sorry.
Temporary accommodation is not truly temporary anymore in this crisis, displacing a generation of children for longer. Adele Robinson, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview tonight, joined by the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the former Conservative special advisor, Salma Shah. Welcome to both of you. I know you've hot-footed it from the Treasury party tonight, so we'll find out more about that. But certainly among the stories we will be discussing, this on the front of the Times, the headline, UK soldiers poised to train troops in Ukraine. Back with that and more in just a moment.